Today, we are traveling through the world of frequencies with Lisa Roye Bowers. Discover how sound, light, meditation, and prayer can transform your brainwaves, balancing out your energy and mood. Let's heal our brain and each other with the natural magic of sound, light, and beyond. This is my conversation with my kind, loving friend, Lisa Roye Bowers. You've said that everything is frequency. Can you explain that?
It is. Everything, whether we can see it or not, has atoms and molecules that spin and they create a frequency or a vibration or a sound wave. Just because we can't hear it doesn't mean it doesn't exist. And one of the examples I like to give is a ceiling fan. When it's stagnant and it's not moving, it looks like it has holes in between it. But when it's spinning, it's solid. And in that solid state, it's transmitting frequency. And that's much like atoms and molecules, how they are. Our bodies are not solid. Our bodies look like they're solid, but they're actually not. They actually emit energy and they're always moving and always changing. Does that make sense?
Yeah, but I'm still trying to get a grip on what are these frequencies in us? Because when I think of frequency, I think of, there's like sound waves, those kinds of frequencies. There's light. Some of these we can see, some of them we can hear, and some of them are totally invisible and we can't hear them. But I think this is beyond sound and light, but it's perhaps connected to it. Like, I'm trying to imagine what these frequencies in our bodies and our brains are.
Right. And they're all very common. I know you said they're different, but in each one of those circumstances, they all do have these atoms and molecules that spin around and they create very unique sound waves and very unique properties. And it's the same thing in our bodies. Every organ, every bone, every tissue has its own unique frequency that it emits.
So we are simultaneously these like output devices. We sort of vocalize and we make facial expressions and we sort of express these frequencies and we send them out, I guess. And you've mentioned earlier that through our heart, we're also kind of sending them out, even if we can't see that. But we're also this input device. We have these sensory organs, eyes and ears and stuff. So we're receiving these frequencies. And so it seems like what you're saying is there's this bidirectional thing going on where the outside world of light and sound and people and animals and nature and everything is sort of influencing us and changing our frequencies. But also when we are, making our movements and making our vocalizations, etc., we are also sending out these waves and affecting the world. This is how I'm imagining it. And we're not all solid. We can see it this way. But if you sort of like found a special technology device to see how things really are, it'd be like this weird meltiness of waves and frequencies kind of bouncing around and melting into each other. But yeah, kind of maybe you could fix me where I'm wrong there or expand on that.
I think you're on the right track. And there was an explanation that I heard from a Dr. Kim Dioramo. I believe I'm saying her name the right way. And she talked about how we have 3 different states in our body. And I thought this was just wonderful, that we are actually transmitters because we're sending off signals all the time. You know, we send off good vibes and bad vibes. And when some people are in different emotional states, they send off different frequencies than when, if they're down or if they're energetic or happy. And you and I have discussed before about, when our backs turn and that person comes in the room, even before we turn around to meet them, sometimes we get a feeling from them and it can give us either really good vibes or really just negative, harsh ones. So we're always transmitting frequency and energy back and forth all day long. We're also receptors because in order to receive that feeling from that person, we have to be able to be receptors. And then we're transmuters. We're transmuting, we're changing all the time. Our bodies are constantly in this ebb and flow of life. So we're never the same from second to second.
Yeah. And we might be just kind of haphazardly walking through this world of frequencies and being changed and changing things kind of without our conscious, deliberate action. But there's also ways to deliberately influence these waves inside of ourselves and out there in the world. One of these technologies that you've discovered is this AO scan from Soldex. Let's talk about that and how we can use that to both understand and read our own frequencies inside of ourselves, but also change them through sound and other things.
Absolutely. But before we get into that, I would like to talk a little bit about different types of frequency we have in our body that people don't think about. The brain, we can influence the brain and we can influence through what's called neuroplasticity, which are these little pathways in the brain that give us our habits and our patterns. We can actually change those. And we know scientifically, and I have worked as a neurofeedback technician, that we have these different hertz, which are different frequencies or energy measurements in the brain. For example, delta brainwaves tend to fall between zero point 0.5 and 4 hertz. The theta tend to fall between the 4 and the 8 hertz. And then the alpha, which are the calming ones, tend to fall between 8 and 14 hertz. And the beta between 14 and 30 hertz. All of those can be influenced, and the neural pathways influenced through different techniques, one of which is the AO scan. But it's not just the AO scan, it can be different types of meditation, it can be different types of breath work, it can be affirmations, it can be yoga, it can be our body and movement. So all of those different things can influence our brainwaves, influence our body, and influence the neuroplasticity in our brain to help us create different patterns or different habits. So from there, that's where I'd move on to the AO scan, because that's technology that was created that is a frequency-based technology. And amazing men, their technology is put into this in their science, but it's known as a biofrequency or bioresonance device. And it also uses electromagnetic signals. And some of the tests we use in our healthcare system also use electromagnetic systems. So it's not new. We're just using it in a different way. And some of the great minds like Albert Einstein, Nikola Tesla, and Raymond Reif, their research has been put into this technology. And Tesla was the one that used electromagnetic and wireless communication. He kind of laid the groundwork for that. And then there's Albert Einstein. We can't forget him. And he worked a lot with quantum science and then that relationship between energy and frequency. And then Raymond Reif, he's the one that learned that certain frequencies could actually destroy certain disease patterns or certain fungus, parasites, etc. So all of their technology has been put in, shouldn't say all of their technology, pieces of what they studied and what they learned has been put into this AO scan technology, which is just amazing to me. So what it's based on is that the first thing you do is a voice scan. It's called the inner voice. And you speak 10 seconds into the AO scan. You actually have a headset on that sits on your trigeminal nerve, and it gives these frequencies or vibrations through the trigeminal nerve into the body and back around. And it gives a feedback loop and gives information on what might be in balance or out of balance in our system.
What do you mean by imbalance or out of balance? And how do we get out of balance?
The world. We get out of balance with the world. So, what I mean by that is everything in our body has been measured. And the Russians actually did a lot of this. Every cell, every bone, every fiber, every muscle. And it has a very specific frequency that it should fall between, similar to lab work. When you do a lab, if it falls between this and this, it's considered in range or in balance. Well, that's the same thing with literally everything in our body. So when the AO scan measures this, it's actually measuring what falls within that range and what doesn't. And then it tries to put optimizing frequencies back in to balance or cancel out what might be out of range. Then you ask, how do we get out of balance? Lack of sleep, bad food, not enough light, relationships, stress. There's so many things, EMFs, that can bring us out of balance. But I personally feel a large part of that is our own mindset. Our mindset can make or break us. You have certain people that can go through the same circumstances, such as disease or cancer, and one person will just go through the very same thing with flying colors and the next not. They truly think that our mindset has so much to do with how we move through life and how our body's balanced.
Yeah. So when this AO scan is listening to our voice, because that's what it does. What I did, I said my name and I said a couple things for 15 seconds or something, and then it analyzed my voice, and then it spit out some music to rebalance my frequencies. What was it listening to? I imagine it maybe the pitch or the loudness or the speed. What is it? What is it measuring, and how does this connect to things like our emotions or mental state or the state of our frequencies, etc.?
Yeah, that's a great question. Well, the technology is very similar to the technology that they use on lie detector tests. So it's actually examining 12 different notes in your voice, C, C sharp, D, D sharp, E, F, F sharp, G, G sharp, A, and A sharp. And it's looking at the highest three out of range that don't fall within that blueprint frequency and the one lowest out of range. And each and every one of these is connected with different hormones, different functions that are happening in our body, different emotional states. And so it gives the report based on these. And then it generates from that analysis beautiful harmonizing pieces of music that tend to have the opposite note that was out on the scale, the music scale, and bring the body into range. To totally understand how that happens, I have to tell you, I don't. I just know that it's powerful and that it really works beautifully.
Okay, so our voice tells uh, includes a lot of information about what's going on inside of ourselves, but also we can use special sounds to rebalance those things inside of ourselves.
We can. How many times have you gone into a movie theater and, the first thing they do is play music to try to influence your emotions one way or the other? And they do that throughout the movie as well. So it can either be really energizing or it can be very, sad, melancholy type music. And that's what's happening there as well. Music is powerful, powerful. And there's also been studies on how vibration of music can actually heal. I don't know if you remember hearing the story of our senator in Arizona, Gabby Gifford, that was shot. Um, and it actually, paralyzed her. Well, she used music to help restore her side of the brain that was injured and help her move through her healing. Is she 100% healed? She's not, but she has just really gone leaps and bounds beyond what anybody thought she could. And that music and that vibration was such a big part of that. I've also researched how people have healed cancer using harp music because the harp leans against the body. And as they're playing those notes, that vibration goes up through the body and that frequency helps balance out, the whole state. So it's really amazing what music and notes and harmony can do.
Yeah, and this music is we perceive music as music, but it seems like also what you're saying is really it's these vibrations, these waves that are entering us and changing us. I mean, we can only hear a certain part of the spectrum of sound anyway. Like I think from like 20 hertz to 20,000 hertz or something. And you mentioned some of these delta waves and theta waves, binaural beats type stuff that falls below that range. So we're not actually hearing it, but it is still entering us. So maybe this is a kind of a fun way to like look at music. Is it's just this energy, this information, these waves that are coming in and crashing into our waves and making a smoother or more chaotic ocean or something. This is kind of a fun way to think about music, and even realizing there's sounds out there that we don't even perceive, but they are still influencing us.
Right, right. It's just like if you use a garage door opener or a remote control to turn on your TV, we're not hearing that frequency, but it's still working. And kind of going back to the music, one of the things I like to communicate is, when you have somebody tuning a piano, let's say it's C sharp, they have a C sharp tuning fork, and they'll hit that tuning fork and they'll keep tweaking and tweaking that string on the piano until it's vibrating in harmony. And that's very much how sound waves can do to our body. If if our body is not in harmony, it's disharmony, right? And that's when I believe disease pattern can set in. And it's that similar to when you're listening to an orchestra and there's just one note that you hear that is out, or one instrument, and it just creates havoc in the whole piece, no matter how beautiful it is. I truly believe that's how it is in our body. We can just have a few things that are out of balance and it can create disharmony to our entire body.
Yeah. It also partly explains why we react differently to different people depending on like the tone of their voice, the speed or the loudness or whatever, and why they say the body language or it's not what you say, it's how you say it or whatever. Maybe it's oh well, it's you're sending out certain frequencies that are just like they feel like an attack or they feel like love. They're just literally that. So it kind of also explains. Oh, it teaches us how to communicate with each other differently, like being aware of our waves we're spitting out.
Right. And different emotions have different frequency. I wish I had that chart handy for you, but love is one of the highest frequencies. And scripturally, and I am a Christian, I do believe in that. The Bible is very specific, talking about love, 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 love. And when you think about what a high vibration and a high frequency that emotion is, and then, at the bottom is just anger and detest and hate. It gives a very low frequency. I don't know if you've interviewed anybody that talked about Dr. Emoto's work with water and those energy patterns, but Dr. Emoto actually studied water and how certain emotions affected his water. And he would even just tape the energy of certain words like I love you or I hate you or wish you were dead. And if you research him, that water that was negative that said, "I hate you," or "wish you were dead," was almost like murky, muddy water when it froze. And yet the "I love you" looked like a beautiful, beautiful snowflake. So we affect so much, and we are such high energy patterns, and we're full of water. We have so much water in us that when we're shifting through these energy patterns and emotions, they're also affecting the water in our body.
Then it makes it really easy to imagine or understand these waves because water has waves. But another point, another thing that brings up is these sounds and I imagine light and other kinds of frequencies influence things like water. They must certainly influence these other things that are apparently separate objects and they don't follow the same rules as humans. I imagine specifically animals, especially the higher mammals, but even the birds and the fish and the reptiles and even the plants and perhaps even some non-living objects. I don't know if we can influence them. Well, I mean, is water living? It's sort of on the boundary of life.
Right. Well, and if you think about birds when they migrate, they're using an energy of frequency to put them on their path, their honing path. So it's almost like they have this built-in radar system. So, it's really powerful. And I do think you can influence all of those. With the AO scan, there is a place that you can enter your pets and you can help balance your pets out as well. And I love that because they have no idea what's going on. They have no preconceived notions. And the example that I love to give is our own little Pomeranian who was 14 years old when I first got the AO scan. He was on death's door. He just was. We didn't think he was going to live much longer. And I started using AO scan, and within just a couple of months, people were thinking he was 5 years old. 5 years old. And one time he was laying there, he was just panting, panting, panting. I thought, gosh, I think he has something going on with his heart. So with the AO scan, we can do what's called a custom playlists. So I did one for the heart, 2 minutes long. And from the moment I started it until it stopped, he had no idea when I was stopping. It didn't even project any noise. He bounced up on his feet, he waggled his little tail, and off he went. So I love working with children. I actually tried working with some plants that are dying, and I wasn't consistent enough. But I think you can influence everything with frequency. I really do believe it. It was a process that I had to learn. I didn't always believe it. I tested the waters, and one of the funniest things I tested, which is a definite object, is I was at my functional medicine office. We had a printer that just wouldn't work. It was breaking all the time, and we had so many patients that day, I just needed it to work. So I put it in the AO scan, and I actually did project love and gratitude towards it, and do you know it never broke down again after that, ever? Was that coincidental? I don't know, but
It makes sense though, because once you shatter the belief about our perception that these objects are solid and certain objects are really solid, like they don't move, they're an
right,
object, they're a non-living thing. This is a living thing. This thing's more living. This thing has consciousness. This thing does not. We have these perceptions. That's how things appear. But if we strip all that away and go just down to the level of frequencies, it all makes sense. Well, yeah. Well, why would this sort of conglomeration of frequencies be different from this one over here? Um,
right.
they're different certainly, but to be like completely immune to the influence of sound or light or anything, that seems a bit crazy because it is one world.
It is, and I remember years and years ago seeing a movie called The Philadelphia Experiment based on supposedly a true experiment that was done on a Navy ship where they tried, um, I think, just making the ship disappear and then come back again. And I'll have to research this a little more, but people actually came back in it with their bodies kind of hardened in it, like it didn't come back together like it should have. So it was not a smooth experiment, but I don't really know if that's true or not. But I do believe that I could see things like that happening. We all grew up watching Star Trek, where they would transmute from one place to another, and I truly do believe we're on the cusp of that happening. You talk about people that can do teletransportation. I don't know how that happens. Or they can, see things that are in another part of the world or country. They can see what's happening as they hover over their own bodies. Those are all fascinating areas to me that I honestly would love to study more and do more research on because you're right. If it's all molecules and atoms, why is it so hard for us to believe that it's possible?
Yeah, there's all these things that seem to go beyond the rules of space and time. Like you can pray and uh, weirdly communicate with God
Hmm.
or your family that lives across the world or um, dead relatives and people like that. And maybe people might say, well, that you're not, but it seems, yeah, a lot of people are, or that's how it seems.
Hmm.
So, but if, yeah, like again, what becomes possible and what kind of makes sense opens up when you realize, oh, it's just all frequency. So we're not really bounded in by all these
Right.
normal limits of space and time.
Right. And so I have two things I want to discuss on that. The first one is how many times have you been thinking about somebody and then you run into them or they call or they text or they email? And if that happens every once in a while, you might not think about it. But if it happens a lot, it's like, how are you influencing beyond boundaries that person? And the other thing that you and I have talked about before was what I witnessed with doing a brain mapping with this one woman. It was an event where I was a technician. And when we brain mapped her and came back and processed her brain map, the frontal lobe, I went over the hertz in the brain for some of it. The frontal lobe usually runs between 25 and 40 hertz. And when we exported her data, it was over a million hertz on each side of her brain. A million. So we asked her what on earth was going on while she was being brain mapped. And she said that she had people all over the world praying for her. while she was doing her meditation. If that doesn't make you believe in the power of prayer, I don't know what does. I know it really convinced me, and I already believed in the power of prayer, but to see that numerically was incredible.
Yeah. But there's certain things that it's sort of like love. It's hard to pin it down and be like, this is love or this is a loving energy, but we feel it. And when you pray, even if you don't believe in God, still, even if you pray, you still feel this like,
Mhm.
that's like, there's something here. It's the same sort of feeling you get when there's certain things like certain foods, for example, like it might be like this really healthy. For me, it's fish, certain kinds of fish. I drink in this pu'er tea right now. It feels like it's a certain frequency. It's like, it feels loving, and I can't explain what's going on. And there's all kinds of things like that. There's a music that you gave me. It's the same thing. It all feels like the same thing. It's like this godly energy. And then there's other things like I'm kind of smashing a bunch of things together now. But like say a different example, you might be like sipping on whiskey, listening to heavy metal, eating I don't know. Eating cigarettes, eating them, riding a motorbike or something, that's a whole different vibe. And that's not a loving thing. You don't even need to measure it, but you're like, this is so different than that loving tea and the music and
Right,
the prayer and stuff. And so
right.
experientially, it's like, yeah, the prayer makes complete sense.
Well, and it's interesting you brought up the food because I actually just did a LinkedIn post on food having biophotons, which are light particles in it. And when we're eating that, we're actually eating light. And of course, vegetables that are uncooked have a higher light particle frequency than cooked vegetables, or vegetables that are frozen once they're defrosted literally go back to the same frequency, which I think is just amazing. And I have some stats right here. It's called photons, is what they measure it by, and sprouts are incredible. The sprouts have 1,500 photons per centimeter square per second. The mung bean sprouts, organic eggs versus conventional organic eggs, have 9,300 photons per centimeter square, and conventional eggs have 6,800. So there's even a difference between organic and conventional. The the light that's emitted depletes the older, all of that becomes. But when you think about we're actually eating light, it even changes your perspective of food.
This is a good way to shift it too. It's certainly a healthier and happier way to look at it. Yeah, then and you can also imagine like, okay, how much light, what kind of light is in this food? Even if you don't know, you can look at a bag of Doritos versus I don't know, a thing of broccoli sprouts.
Have no light in
You're like, there's no light. This is
right.
pure darkness. The elephant graveyard. But yeah, you look at like some broccoli sprouts or like a fresh fish or
Right.
any of these nice eggs. You're like, ooh, this thing's again. It goes back to that question of what's alive and what's not alive. I don't. There's something living in here. There's energy.
Yeah. Absolutely. And I think that's just fascinating. As I started researching that, I just thought, gosh, we really are amazing. And we were made in such amazing ways. When you think, if that food emits light, so do the trees, so does the grass, not to mention the sun. Of course, it does. But we are these beings of light. And the more that we can help support that through balancing sound waves and the food choices we make and meditation, and the choices we make with balancing our brain, the higher of that frequency, that vibration, that light we can emit.
Yeah. I want to go back to sound a little bit. One thing that distinguishes the sounds through the AO scan that you gave me from, say, normal, typical music like rock and pop and hip hop and stuff is it has I think it's tuned to different frequencies. It may or may not be tuned to C sharp, but also it has these solfeggio frequencies, binaural beats, and other things. So maybe you could break down what's in that music.
Absolutely. So, well, let's start with the binaural beats. What those are is they actually have slightly different frequency on each side of the brain, because you should be listening to this music with your headset or earbuds. And on each side, it has a little different frequency in each ear. And then creates what they call almost a phantom frequency, which is a split in between the two tones. And that's what's wonderful with that is it's helping to kind of create more of a whole brain balance than just regular music would be. The solfeggio frequencies that are in there, those go back all the way to the Gregorian chants with the monks, those Gregorian chants. And when they analyze, those actually have the solfeggio frequencies in them. So they supposedly interact with the body on a vibrational level, and I really do believe that. I say supposedly, but I truly believe that. And it helps bring that body into a certain emotional state. What I think is fascinating with this is my geeky math side with those solfeggio frequencies is when you add the total frequency up, and I'll give you some examples. They either equal 3, 6, or 9. What does that mean numerically? I don't know, but it's incredible. So you have the 396 hertz, which is supposed to liberate guilt and fear. It's believed to help individuals overcome negative feelings and emotional blockages. Well, if you add the 6 and the 3, that's 9, and add that to the 9, that's 18. Then you add the 1 and the 8, and that's a 9. So that's where you get that. The 417 hertz, it says, is linked to facilitating change that is thought to help clear negative energy and past traumas. So that's 417. There again, the 7 and the 1 is 8. Add the 4, that's 12. And then add the 1 and the 2, and that's 3. So as you add all the numbers together, they're either going to equal that 3, 6, or 9. 528 is the love frequency or the miracle tone. It's said to promote DNA repair. The 639 hertz is supposed to enhance relationships. 741 hertz helps awaken intuition and enhance problem solving. The 852 hertz is known for promoting spiritual awakening. And the 963 is often called the frequency of the gods. It's the frequency that's said to activate the pineal gland in the brain. And do you know anything about the pineal gland in the brain?
Well, maybe you could tell us about it.
Yeah, so the pineal gland actually falls in between the eyes. And when I was doing the brain mapping or brain scanning, that's the one that can open up this higher frequency and open up what we call the thalamic gate to the outside world. So it's very spiritual. If you look at a lot of old symbolism, you'll see the pine cone. So it's a little pine cone shaped gland, and it's supposed to have this amazing spiritual power and the opportunity to open us up to a higher connection and a higher power. So you see it a lot in the Roman culture and in some of the other old cultures, the pine cone or the eye of the pineal gland. So its powers have been believed for a long time. And I just think that's all fascinating. So some of those frequencies, I have no way of knowing which ones are built into the music as you listen to it. But some of those frequencies are built into that as you're listening to it. So, when you're achieving these emotional shifts, it's because there's so many powerful combinations that are built into this.
Yeah, and it's changing the frequencies in different areas of our brain. Maybe we can measure that too if we put on an EEG cap or something like. Well, maybe something more than that, but
You can, right. Well, no, yeah, you absolutely could measure what's going on in the brain if you were listening to it while that was going on. And I wish I had the equipment to do that. It would be fascinating.
yeah. It also is another way of looking at mental illness. There's like different theories of mental illness. There's like the chemical imbalance theory about dopamine and serotonin and stuff, and activity in certain parts of the brain. There's too much activity in the PFC or not enough, or down in the basal ganglia or whatever.
Mm.
And this is another language of these parts of the brain. But another way of looking at it, because you mentioned earlier how the frontal lobes have a certain frequency where they're supposed to be set at or something, where it's functioning right.
That's average, right?
The average, okay. But I guess it sounds like you're also saying is different other parts of the brain are maybe tuned differently on average, and then maybe this music is another way to kind of reactivate certain parts of the brain. So it seems like we can also use it to understand and perhaps heal things like ADHD or schizophrenia or whatever. Maybe in combination with pharmaceuticals or lifestyle things like sleep and exercise and food or whatever. But it seems like definitely a tool in the toolkit.
Yes, yes, I think you're correct, and kind of on that note, the company just came out with Solex just came out with something called the Hub, and it actually hooks into the AO scan and has the alpha, theta, delta, gamma waves you can program into it. And I believe that's another tool that could really help balance some of these areas. You know, our brains are powerful. Our bodies want to be balanced. They want that homeostasis. Sometimes it's just giving it the right tools to release that and allow that to happen.
We talked a little bit about sound, and we could talk for hours more about it, but I do want to talk about light frequencies as well. Yeah, I know it's all the same thing. Everything's frequencies, and you can't probably strip it all down to the same thing. But how do you use light?
Well, one of the most powerful things that I believe ways to use light is through grounding. To go outside right as the sun is coming up, put your feet barefoot on the ground and watch that sun as it comes up. And when you're talking about the pineal gland, that goes through the eyes and triggers that pineal gland. And so, in my opinion, that's one of the most powerful ways to use light. Now, on another level of light is red light and infrared light. I do use that and with my clients, and that can be powerful as well because it can help stimulate what's called the mitochondria or the energy pattern of the cell. And it can, really speed up, give life force to the body. And the near infrared goes deeper. It runs at near red runs between 640, 660, and some of it 685. And the near infrared can go up to over 1,000. And it just penetrates deeper in the body. And it's my understanding that even cancer clinics are starting to use near infrared therapy to help with cancer. So, light is just so important. It's so important to add into our lives. Of course, we all or most of us are aware of the fact that when light hits our skin, it helps convert the vitamin D, etc. So it has so many functions beyond anything we can understand.
Yeah, and the sun seems to be the ultimate technology that gives us all the wavelengths and stuff, and we can perceive some of this, as color between the 380 and 700 nanometer range, and then it gets if you fall below that, you get into the infrared and beyond, and then you go about that, you get into the UV and gamma rays and stuff like that.
Mhm.
But do you know of any other technology aside from the sun that lets us kind of use these imperceivable light waves to change ourselves?
Yeah, just the light spectrums, they're using green light more right now, the blue light, red lights. There's also terahertz, which is the frequency that's being used to heal the body. And I actually have an incredible, which I don't think I talked to you about, testimonial on the hertz. We have a friend that got an ulcer that was similar to a diabetic ulcer, but not quite. It was going to her bone, and she was told at first if she didn't get it to stop going deep, that she could lose her foot. It would be amputated. So my mom just got this terahertz tool from Solex, and she said, "I don't know, let's just try it." Where a friend's foot was wrapped. You have to understand they're using it through the wrap that's not coming off. They have no idea what's happening. And it went from possible foot amputation to possible skin graft to nothing. The use of that terahertz, which is a type of frequency, actually helped promote the energy of the body and the energy's healing. And in essence, saved her foot. I think that's incredible.
No, it is. And then we can turn it all off too, and that seems to be also a powerful tool. Say we could turn off all the lights by closing our eyes or being in darkness, or we can maybe at the same time or separately turn off all the sounds, be in silence. And then I guess yeah, it makes sense also why maybe the prayer and the meditation work so well because in a way we're kind of turning off the sound and the light and or we're turning it down, and maybe that also taps us into another dimension or whatever.
Right, and the importance with, changing the light is it affects our melatonin and our serotonin, which is responsible for waking us up and putting us to sleep. So, there again, that light and then being in that silence and being able to be alone with ourselves and truly go within and de-stress our bodies and change those neural pathways is such an important component that most people don't take time to do. I don't think. Shouldn't say most. A lot of people don't.
Yeah. When we are in darkness, or we have our eyes closed, or we're in silence and our ears are, plugged off from the world, it seems like there's nothing coming in, but it also feels like there's something coming in, or we're connected to something. So this is like a question you can't really answer, because it's like, what is death? What is darkness? What is nothingness or something? But how do you perceive what's going on during these times, uh, essentially meditation or prayer? I think it's prayer you're vocalizing, but may or may not be. But yeah, silence and kind of a darkness. Is something coming in, or what's going on?
Well, I truly believe it's hard for us to be 100% in silence and 100% in darkness. But that's why it's important to learn to slow down our brain, close our eyes, and internalize that. And for us in our minds to shut everything out that's going on around us externally. And that takes practice, it takes time, but powerful things can happen. And that's where you can influence your day. That's where you can, I truly believe, bring things that seem impossible into possibilities. I know one of the events that I experienced that was a meditation event was we were told to close our eyes and really focus on something that we wanted to see. And I kept seeing a heart with a rose on it. And I just kept, focusing on that and focusing on that. Well, lo and behold, at the end of the event, one of the other workers there took and brought us all these wooden keychains that were heart shaped with flowers on it. And it was the exact color and the exact flower that I had visualized in my brain. There again, is that coincidental? I don't think so.
Yeah, it's hard to even communicate about, but
Yeah,
it is a interesting feature of things like prayer and meditation, that we tend to have our eyes closed and we're in a generally quiet place, and it's almost like we're harnessing and focusing in all this energy, and to, like, like laser beam it out into further directions or something, in space and time, or opening up our whatever receiver, so we can, like,
right.
receive things more easily. But it can't be coincidence that things are quieter and darker in these sort of paranormal communication scenarios like these. They seem paranormal, but they're just, oh, maybe we have to alter our input and output device to 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 receive or understand this information, or send it.
And to change, right? To really, be that transducer, that transmuter, and that receiver, to be all three of those. And we're doing it all the time. It's just how well do we want to do it? And I think that does take practice. And it does take tools such as the AO music, or, the different areas that you can use, the bowls, the sound bowls, there's all kinds of amazing things that can help us hone in on our skills. But it can happen. You just have to learn how to do it.
Yeah, just like earlier, I mentioned how certain things like prayer, and for me, it's this puerty and this sardines, and God. They're all kind of like, oh, it seems like these are kind of buddies, if not the same thing. These things have this sort of godly energy, but we can't pin it down and say, this is it.
Well, when we're talking about prayer and God and the power of prayer, I absolutely believe in that. I've experienced it. I've experienced, that energy, that fullness, that wholeness, and you look around and you talk about light and energy and how beautifully they all connect. They seem separate, but we are so interconnected, and that's part of quantum science. Part of quantum science is everything being connected and everything influencing everything. We can't separate it. Just like we can't separate things in our body. We can't yes, we get disease state, but why did we get in that disease state? And what all is that disease state affecting? When I make a choice, how do I influence you? When you make one, how do you influence me? We just can't separate that. We're so interconnected. And I definitely believe that God and prayer plays a big piece in that.
Yeah, then there's other things that clearly have the other kind of energy, but we still gravitate towards it. So I wonder why we still gravitate towards these other things that are actually making us further out of balance. Maybe this is getting into the whole God and devil kind of stuff or something. But
Not really, but when we're talking about neural pathways, sometimes just our habits that have been our bad habits, or, some people just have constant negative thought patterns. So it creates these pathways in their brain that constantly attract that. And so I believe that's part of why we gravitate towards those things because we've just created those pathways in our brain that may not be healthy, but that's what our brain knows. And our brain will keep going back to what it knows.
yeah, so perhaps these light and sound waves and things can also rewire our brain or kind of create some kind of neuroplasticity or something and kind of redirect those habits or undo them.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I do think we have to have that willingness. You can give people the best tools in the world. And if they don't have that willingness to really follow through to do what they need to do, or in the back of their brain, they're saying, I'm doing it, but I'm just doing it through, you know, habit or through just because you told me to. Uh, do I think it will have no impact on the brain or body? Not necessarily. Going back to scripture, even Jesus healed those that didn't believe. So, do I think the ability is there? I do. But I do think people can be their own worst enemies and they can stop the effectiveness of certain things if that's what they're in their brain. If they really are addicted to, that negative way of thinking, they're really addicted to, that emotional state, that anxiety, that stress. I do think we can stop our own healing, but there really are tools out there to help. You just have to be willing to open up to it and utilize them.
Yeah, and knowing all this, it kind of makes it a bit easier to open up and jump into this stuff because some people will be a bit turned off or scared from this imperceivable world. But if you realize, oh, that feeling that you have, like I have about this, this tea or these sardines or the God or whatever, you can you can realize, oh, there's a certain feeling. You get it with certain people too. You're like, I'm not supposed to like this person, or I don't know what it is. Why we just met, or whatever. But there's certain people you meet, and you're like, this is loving thing. I like this person, and you can't explain why. You can't explain why this food is making you feel this way, but it almost makes you more confident, like, oh, when I get that feeling, maybe I should jump into it. Maybe I should go. Maybe I should go there instead of being like, oh no, it doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense.
Absolutely. And, I didn't even discuss with you how I first got into this crazy world, through my own health journey. When you want to talk about that, is I'm already in the world of herbs through an ex husband that needed some assistance. And I really am grateful for what I learned through that. But then I went to go see a girlfriend who was dying of cancer in the state of Washington. And I really believe between the mold and the emotions, when I came back, I got this welt on my bottom. And by the end of the night, it went systemic. And I was covered in welts. I couldn't touch myself without my skin welting up. I could hardly wear clothes. And it lasted for 8 months. Nothing helped. So a friend of mine who's a DO, or I'm sorry, an ND, had a frequency based device called the GEO. And after one session, I was having relief. And by the fourth session, the hives were gone, just completely gone. Because I think it did balance that emotional state, that physical state. And, I think it really targeted it on all levels. And that's when I first became passionate about frequency based healing. I was raised a little Baptist girl, and that would have been taboo, right, to even talk about. So it just was so amazing. My mom and I went ahead and got the device together. We took all of our biofeedback training together, and it really put me onto a whole different world of how our mind and our bodies work together and how they can also heal together.
Yeah, and another feature of the AL scan is it has us read or say an affirmation, and then it records it, and then it has you listen to that recording of your own voice while listening to this music. What is the difference between listening to your own affirmation in real time versus listening to a recording of it? And then we could talk more about affirmations in general. But that is an initial question I have.
Yeah, so what's so powerful about it's called mind sync, that part of the AO scan. And what I love about it is it does record our voice and then it puts that customized music in behind. So not only are you hearing your voice play back in your head, but you're hearing that very specific customized music. We are so good at giving ourselves negative self talk all the time. How many times do we look at ourselves and go, oh my gosh, I look horrible today? Or, oh, how dumb was that? We always, always, always give ourselves this negative self talk. So, what's beautiful about doing this in our own voice, and some people can't stand it at the beginning. They literally cannot stand hearing their own voice give affirmation. But I think because our brain and our body knows that voice, it's going to respond much better and much more authentically than if it was somebody else's voice that's playing through or coming through. We can't detach from our own voice. Where when somebody else is giving us affirmation and listening to it, we can detach from that. We can just zone out. But when it's our own voice, it's a little harder to run away from. So, I hear testimonials of people that have just really achieved all kinds of goals by listening to their own voice, but at first they hate it. So it's not comfortable, but it's so powerful. And, then just affirmations, period, are powerful because they're, again, creating those better neural pathways in the brain. If you keep telling yourself how loving you are, how good you are, how confident, you know, as you're creating all of that, even though you don't believe it at the beginning, you're clipping those old neural pathways that are giving the negative statements that are telling you how dumb you are or how insecure you are. So let's get that positive affirmation in there and give ourselves some love.
So are the ways we talk about ourselves? I mean, we think of these things as like beliefs, and they're beyond the world of frequencies. They're ideas. They're intangible. But is there like also kind of a set frequency to
There is.
these?
Absolutely. Yes, there's an energy and frequency behind it. Think about how you respond or how you feel when you say a certain word or a certain sentence or a certain thought. Like, oh, I'm so stupid. How does your body react at that moment? How does your body feel? It's like that tuning fork is tuning in on a negative pathway, and that's not what you want. So, all of that is energy, all of that is frequency, all of that creates certain hormones and certain electrical kind of cascades to happen in the body all at the same time. What we tell ourselves and what we think is absolutely important.
It's crazy because you always thought of these things as like kind of separate worlds. But we
Right.
can change our beliefs and our ways of thinking by things like sound and light, but also, by changing somehow on our own beliefs, that will also rebalance the frequencies within us. And it's all like a bunch of like a billion different things, food and light and people and our beliefs and all these different things all coming together and creating us. But it's a bit overwhelming, but also kind of exciting because there's so much possibility for change, yet also so much possibility to fall down.
Right. But I truly do think it simplifies it because if you can view the whole world, the whole universe as quantum entanglement, quantum energy, that we all influence each other, and that influence really is based on atoms and molecules and frequency and how we can influence those, in a way, it makes it easier. It simplifies it. It's let's just change that energy pattern. Let's change that atom molecule frequency pattern to help us for the better instead of demise.
Yeah, and I know the answer to this is like a whole library of textbooks. But I'm not too familiar with quantum energy. Honestly, when I hear the word, I think, oh, it's like one of these like I don't know, spiritual scam artist type things or something. And some people if you feel that, but yeah, that's also very been proven by science too. I mean, Einstein and all these guys were working with it. What is quantum energy? How does it differ from this I don't know traditional view of energy?
Well, I think, it does vary in a very vast way because if you talk about different energy, you're looking at it separately. You're not looking at everything as being entangled and entwined together. So, what you're looking at is Michael's energy does not affect anybody or anything else, or Lisa's energy does not affect anybody else. But that's truly not the case. It's not the truth. My thoughts, my perceptions influence a lot of things in people around me, as yours do. And we can't disconnect from those. There's something that I heard about a long time ago called the butterfly effect, and that the flap of a butterfly's wings can affect everything out in the universe. So even though we think, oh, I can do this, who am I hurting? I'm hurting nobody but myself, or I'm helping nobody but myself. That's not true. We're influencing, people all around us, and those people influence people around them and things around them. So it just goes out into this great big universal cascade. And what do they talk about? 6 degrees of separation with people, so we influence and influence and influence and influence, and on down it goes. So that's the difference. Even when you look at it through our healthcare system, when we look at the functional medicine, we don't look at the body as separate entities. We look at it as a whole, where our allopathic healthcare system has looked more like, oh, let's just look at the brain. Let's just look at the eyes or the teeth or the joints and not how those affect the entire body.
This is kind of like a random a ball I'm throwing in here, but as I was listening to you, I was just like kind of amazed at the fact that uh, of this technology that we're able to talk to each other from across the world. I can hear your voice, and it seems like this is your voice in basically real time, and we can connect through this weird electronic stuff that we have here. So then it makes me think like of course there must be some natural inbuilt version of these telephones and computers and things. We've built this thing to so that we can perceive it, we can experience it. But going back to the whole prayer and sending out messages to people across space and time who are dead or far away or whatever, yeah, maybe there is sort of this natural inbuilt kind of telephone system, but to get that phone turned on, you just gotta be in a certain state yourself. Just like if you want to hear certain frequencies on the radio, you've got to tune the thing the right way, or if you want to play the music, you got to tune it. So maybe like that goes back to why we're closing our eyes, or we're taking care of our health and being in a certain environment of people that helps us kind of like turn on that radio or get that telephone going. So of course there must be a natural telephone or internet or something.
Right. And if you think about it, when I talk to people about the AO scan and they say, I don't understand how it works from a distance or from afar, I always say, we have this unique identity, this unique total frequency. No two of us are the same, just like no two telephone numbers are the same. If I tried calling you and it was 1 digit off, it wouldn't reach you, correct?
Hmm.
And that's how we are as humans. So, yes, we have that receptor. And I do think that when we get into those quiet states and we get into that prayerful state, we get into that meditation and we eat the right foods and we open our heart channel, I do think that makes us more susceptible to the positive influences that are being sent our way, or we're able to energetically transmit at a greater level. I have to believe when there are people that can read others' auras, And I think there's machines that do that too. Some people have these just huge auras around them and others don't. And they're different colors. So I do believe that all of that is part of our frequency influencing our bodies. And like you said, that kind of built in telephone. It goes back to what I said earlier about how many times have you thought about somebody and all of a sudden they're in your path somehow. I think it's us on a telepathic way bringing them into our field. And sometimes I think, oh my gosh, why did I just think of that person? Because not always somebody I want to connect with, but it happens. It happens all the time for me.
I think it also explains maybe why people listen to podcasts. I was doing a little warm up prep call with a future guest, and he's not too familiar with podcast, and he's saying, why would I listen to a podcast? I can just watch it the YouTube. I like the video." And I'm thinking, yeah, good question. Why do we listen to podcasts? Why would you just take the audio? And it maybe goes back to like what I was talking about, like this wonder of how me and you are hearing each other's voices and we're sending out these sound waves to each other. Maybe people are not going there. They're going there for the content. And maybe I'm doing this for like, to learn or to build a brand or something like that. Maybe. But there's, I think, a deeper level of why we listen to podcasts and maybe why we create things like podcasts is it's it's like that music you gave us, through the AL scan. It's certain frequencies and certain people emit certain frequencies, and by listening to those voices of these, great people, they're because they're probably healthy, they've been thinking, they've been taking care of themselves. It's no coincidence that they built a company or they wrote this book or whatever. They're a professor of this place. Like they've got a certain kind of frequency. So when you're talking to these people, yeah, they've got great ideas and whatever great things to share. But it's also like their actual waves are different. So maybe I'm like selfishly taking this as like some kind of medicine or some kind of like tool to rebalance my brain waves. And then if I don't have this, like if I don't talk to people like you, I get out of balance. And then, yeah, I can like listen to podcasts and there's that too. But I think that partly explains why we listen to podcasts and why we make podcasts. It's like this transmission of these sound waves, of these frequencies to balance ourselves out. And that's kind of cool. It simplifies the whole thing. We're not always doing things for the reason we think we are.
It is. And it's not selfish. Right, it's not selfish to do that. It's actually very healthy to do that. The other thing is there's a lot to be said when we don't have all the other stimulations around us. We don't have a smell, we don't have a taste. All we have are our ears. And I don't know if you've experienced this where you listen to somebody and you think, oh my gosh, I just love their voice. But then when you see them and you can't put their voice and their presence together, it totally shifts what you're hearing and how you're hearing it. So I think without some of that other stimulation, it can create a frequency on a whole different level.
Yeah. It's also kind of we're kind of branching off into a bunch of directions, but it does connect. When you read a book versus watching a movie, for example, I talked about this energy that you feel, this sort of godly energy you can feel through people and foods and environments and nature in different places, eyes closed, love, actual loving relationships. But when you read a book, it goes back to the whole words too thing. You said language and beliefs and all that has certain energy. So when you're just focused on these words, this story without the visuals, it's like it laser beams that stuff into your head, and you're like, I don't know, it's a different vibe, and you can really pick it up. But if you turn it onto a movie, if you add video to it, it's like, oh, the magic is kind of gone, and maybe it goes back to also why we close our eyes when we pray and stuff, because it's if you're praying as you walk around Times Square or something, it's like I don't know, the magic is gone. So there's something about like honing in on one sense or, focusing
Mhm.
on one of these senses, these kinds of frequencies that it feels like magic. It feels beautiful. It feels godly. And if you combine them all together, that's possible, but it's much harder, it seems.
Right. Yeah. And what you were saying, I think, is so true. It's like when you're reading a book, I still love an old fashioned book. I know people read them on their iPads, but I don't get the same feeling when I read it on an iPad as I do on a book. I feel the pages. your sense of smell kicks in. You can smell the paper. But, when I'm reading about those characters and the stories, I'm interpreting that in my brain in a way. Maybe it is kind of like a movie in my brain, but I am creating the characters. I am developing, I'm interpreting the meaning. And then it shows up in a movie. You go, that's not what I thought of at all. So it just brings a different feeling because we can interpret that in our own mind, in our own way, in our own creative channeling.
Yeah, it might go back to the whole quantum physics thing you're saying, how we influence one another. And I think when we're in a connection with things, so we feel like there's this feedback loop between us and the world, or us and the thing, or we're not just like this passive recipient, and that's not just a dead object out there that's disconnected from us. When we feel connected to it and we feel that there's like transfer of energy, it feels much better. So yeah, maybe the book isn't really like being influenced by our whispering voice or whatever. But
Well, it could be though, sure.
it could be, but we're certainly like it seems like there's a relationship going on between the book and us, or the podcast we're listening to, and I know the podcaster isn't hearing us, but there's this feeling of like connection that kind of fades away a bit when you're watching a movie, or there's too much going on. I might just be like obsessed with sound or something, but
No, not at all. And really, I think in essence, what you're talking about is how all of our different senses can create a different influence, a different vibe, a different frequency in our body. And I think that's really what it boils down to. What senses are we using? Because all of our senses influence the frequency, the vibration of things going on around us. So I don't think you're off track at all. I just think, with the book, like I said, we're using our eyes, the smell, our touch, our sense of touch as well. And touch is powerful. Where we're listening to a podcast, it's mainly our ears, but not necessarily because we might be, holding the device or, having ear pods in or a headset. So, it's just different senses that are coming into play as we're relating.
yeah, but it forces us to use our imagination a little bit, and the imagination isn't just like this stupid thing that's disconnected from the larger world. It's influencing it and being influenced by it. So when we're listening to a podcast, and I know I'm going on about this for too long, or reading a book, our imagination ignites, and then that sort of like starts this little feedback loop that feels nice. But when there's no room for imagination, then it's not really, it feels different. It feels like that bag of Doritos or something.
Right. I love that. The dead bag of
Dead.
Doritos. Yes. While you're on that line as well, our external things can influence us positively or negatively. And we all witnessed that in our generation, in 2020. So many people were in fear mode and they went into that lockdown mode and they weren't in regeneration, they weren't in growth. You had all kinds of just horrible things happen. So I think it's really important to acknowledge what we take into our brain and what we listen to and how that can influence us. And there again is that frequency. Absolutely. Absolutely. We had it coming at us in all kinds of different ways, right? So people were reaching for people that could uplift them, that could, help them feel better, that could help them feel, quote, normal in that world. I was very fortunate to be working in a functional medicine clinic that people would literally come in and go, it feels so good to be normal, to feel normal, in this space. So we can all affect each other by what we read, what we listen to, what we speak.
Yeah, it's almost like if something gets isolated and separated from everything else, its frequencies get out of balance, but maybe they just end up really just dying essentially because it's just like so alone, it seems. And, it's no wonder that lack of social connection and lack of connection in general is associated with all these mental illnesses and things, and why people were going crazy during COVID. You can't be alone. Even little objects and animals and plants can't be alone, or they basically die. It makes you think that when we are connected things outside of ourselves, apparently outside of ourselves, but basically we're synced up to the larger system, then our frequencies can be kind of like rebalanced and kind of reset, kind of like the way we sleep each night, or I don't know, we retune our instrument every once in a while. If that instrument is just like off on its own in a corner, it just gets out of tune, and eventually it just dies. It's just broken. But then when you bring that guitar, that flute, back into the world of everything else, it just like it's happy. So it's kind of cool. Like it explains why this social connection. It's another way of explaining how this social connection thing is so helpful, but also why solitude kind of it's easy to imagine too. You can imagine like this thing vibrating, all, but then it just sort of goes off into the distance by itself. You would imagine, yeah, it probably becomes still. It probably dies. But then if it's like caught up in the mess of energy, it keeps moving around and stuff because it's getting bounced around by everything, and it's like it's alive, but it gets over here, it gets lost, it just sort of the ball drops and falls.
Yeah, we were made, I truly believe we were made to be connected. We were not made to isolate. And, even if you just have this little pet, this little fur baby around, people that had animals, I think truly survived better through those 2020, 2021 time frames certainly that had other people in their household, influenced them in a better way. So we are interconnected. We were not meant to separate and to detach from the world. Our creator made us to just really be unity, to come all together and have those other people in our life.
Yeah. But yeah, we've reached this point in the conversation where we talked about a lot of this stuff, the light and the sound and the people and the food and all these different things, and we went into magical directions too that I didn't foresee us going into, but I'm glad we did, and I want to go into more. And yeah, we've reached this point where it's like you want to keep going, not for the information, but just because I want to keep getting these vibes. I want to keep. I don't want to disconnect and all that. So I feel like I'm trying to force a new question, but honestly, I just want to be here. If you can keep fueling these frequencies, that's great. But if not, yeah, maybe we do have to just say goodbye, which I don't want to do.
Oh, no, you're sweet, and I've enjoyed this. You know what's fun about this, and let's go right back to frequency. When you get into these conversations, they're very exhilarating, and they uplift each other and they energize each other. So it is fun. It's part of that attachment to our brain that, you know, we want to keep going. But all good things must come to an end.
Yeah, yeah, but they do come back. Hopefully, so hopefully this does come back that through a phone call or a meeting or something like that. Let's definitely keep in touch.
Absolutely.
And if people want to connect with you as well or learn more about what you're doing or any of this, yeah, give us some links or something.
Absolutely. So you can email me at a new creation wellness at outlook.com. And my website is a newcreationwellness.com. You can also find me on LinkedIn. That's probably where I post the most and get the most information.
Thanks again, Lisa. I'm glad we've been able to talk multiple times. Finally, we're recording it as an episode for everyone else to hear. Yeah, and I'm looking forward to keeping these frequencies, bouncing around each other.
Absolutely. I am too as well, Michael. And thank you for your time. Thank you. I think we're, creating a beautiful friendship, and I appreciate that as well. So let's just keep those good vibes going.